So then the story comes down yesterday afternoon. I'm just, again, afternoon, right? Yesterday afternoon. I'm Doug Gottlieb, by the way, filling in for Colin. And that Jimmy Garoppolo is staying with the San Francisco 49ers. He's staying with the San Francisco 49ers. Now, he had to take less money. It would have been $25 million off the top of the cap based upon his previous salary. That's why he was going to get cut. Instead, it's a $6.5 million 1-year deal, which there are some incentives in there that could bump it up from 7 figures into 8 figures. That we would assume is if Trey Lance either stinks, okay, or gets hurt. And the level to which he's allowed to stink is very much in question. But if he gets hurt, obviously now you have a great backup plan. But it's very interesting to me, and my show follows this show, 3 to 6 Eastern, 12 to 3 Pacific on Fox Sports Radio and the iHeartRadio app. And it's interesting to me how I spent a bunch of time in my car the past 16 hours or so since the Garoppolo news broke. I had to drive my son to football practice, almost an hour away and back, sports radio the whole way. Driving around last night, running a couple errands, and then driving around earlier today. And I'm listening and I'm watching TV shows, and we make, and I get that not only does the NFL pay the bills, but the drama and the way in which we like to perceive things as being dramatic, that by many people's estimation is what makes sports and sports radio interesting. I would love to make this a really interesting story. Right? That the Niners held Jimmy G's feet to the fire. And Jimmy G is just lurking, waiting, knowing Trey Lance isn't good enough. And the Niners know Trey Lance might not be good enough. So this is their backup. Or this one might hurt those debate shows in the morning. Maybe it actually is what it is. And you're like, that's the most cliche sports statement ever. Sure, I got it. What if, and I'm not saying what if, I'm saying it's very, very likely. I can't say I'm 100% sure, but it's very, very likely that you don't have to look and dig all that deep. The Niners had an asset that they felt like, based upon how much he made and how he performed in the most important game of his career. Like, let's not get it twisted. Everybody makes it out that, well, Jimmy G always gets hurt. He did. He also stunk in the second half of the Super Bowl. They had the game won. He played poorly. He wasn't the only reason that they lost, but a Super Bowl winning quarterback would have won that game. He had Emmanuel Sanders open. And again, this is not Doug Gottlieb telling you how quarterbacks are supposed to play. This is Doug Gottlieb talking to actual NFL quarterbacks and football personnel that'll tell you, like, that throw, which he overthrew Emmanuel Sanders, it's supposed to be, if anything, underthrown. That way, if he comes back to the ball, there's a PI, you get the ball at the 1 yard line, you punch it in, you win the game. There were other throws, other decisions, and if you watch Jimmy Garoppolo, who you might like, Colin is super into, way more into than the rest of the NFL. But Garoppolo has that napalm button, right? Where he just completely eviscerates his own cause like once a game. Like, that's a Jimmy G. And at some point, the Niners brass, which has built a championship caliber team. Does anybody want to argue that the Niners, outside of quarterback, feel like a championship caliber team? Right? Deebo Samuel, whatever position you want to call him, he's in the top 5 of his craft. Trent Williams, top 5 of his craft, right? Nick Bosa might be I know this is sacrilege, but Nick Bosa might be the best player in the NFL, best defensive player in the NFL. And I do know that Aaron Donald exists. And Nick Bosa was the MVP of the Super Bowl up until the fourth quarter of that Super Bowl. He was incredible. And we could go through Fred Warner and some of the other defensive players they have. They have elite level talent. So the San Francisco 49ers, who do this for a living and live with and know Jimmy Garoppolo, have dealt with the injuries, have dealt with some of the other little piddly little stuff, understand the napalm button, right? The one gigantic mistake turnover that you know he's going to make. You like set your watch to it. You're like, oh, there's the Jimmy G turnover. And how he performed in the biggest game of his life, especially when it mattered the most in the third and fourth quarter. And they decided, like, look, we think there's better out there. It's not really any different than when they had Alex Smith. Granted, different regime, different coach, different general manager. I understand. But Alex Smith got them to the NFC Championship game. He wasn't the reason that they lost to the Saints. Right? They had 2 fumbles in special teams. But the point was that their evaluation was Colin Kaepernick gave them a better chance. And Colin Kaepernick got them to a Super Bowl. Well, I think that was what they're hoping for with Trey Lance. But what if this is just very simple? They had Garoppolo. They didn't think Garoppolo was the greatest of all time. They didn't feel like they wanted to re-sign him. They made a move for a quarterback. They groomed him for a year. And then they held on to Garoppolo, hoping that someone would have a Minnesota Vikings sort of Teddy Bridgewater sort of injury, where the Philadelphia Eagles were able to pawn off Sam Bradford and get a first-round pick for him. That's what they were hoping. And we go through this entire preseason. The Browns need a starting quarterback, and he could have renegotiated his deal. They need it for 11 games. They weren't interested. Look around the league, and everyone else has, at this point, has talked themselves into whatever quarterback we have, or whatever young quarterback we have, seeing how that plays out. The only team that it makes a ton of sense for is the Seattle Seahawks. And they already are not only in the same division, but have consistently been really competitive against the Niners. And they play them in week 2. So the Niners give Garoppolo the biggest contract for any backup quarterback in the NFL. So they have an asset that they can still trade. Now he's more tradable because he makes less money. It's only a 1-year deal. They protect themselves if Trey Lance gets hurt or Trey Lance is just awful. And they still have that asset that they can still move and still get something back in return while protecting themselves against injury. And then if you ask yourself, okay, well, you've told us all of the things we need to know about San Francisco. Why would Jimmy G sign a deal for $6.5 million? I think it's pretty obvious. What options did he have? You know? The only hope you would have is, I guess, Seattle. Right? I guess Seattle. He's not taking that deal unless he knows there is no better deal out there for him. You know? Unless he knows there ain't anything better out there. And if somebody goes down, I'm sure the Niners have said, look, dude, if all things are good with Trey and somebody goes down and you can go somewhere and start and we can make a move, we'll make that move. But in the meantime, you don't have to leave. Right? You know the offense. You've been a backup quarterback before. Remember, Garoppolo is not one of these guys that came into the league and was anointed and started day one. He knows the job of a backup quarterback. And yeah, he got to swallow his pride a little bit. Okay, we all do. We all do. Hell, Josh Rosen's had to swallow his pride 5-6 times now. And I got it. You're like, well, Garoppolo has started in a Super Bowl, and he played really well in the first half. Go back and look. Other quarterbacks have accomplished similar feats. This is the league. NFL, not for long. Garoppolo's not Aaron Rodgers, not Pat Mahomes. He's not Lamar Jackson. He's not seen as a top 10, top 15. Obviously, and this is not me telling you. It's the league. He wouldn't take this deal if there was something better out there. If somebody had said, hey, let him cut you, you'll be our starter. Because the conversations do actually happen, whether it's tampering or not. He would not take He would not take $19 million less unless he knew that was significantly more than anything that was out there for him. So what if we just take it for what it is? The Niners have an asset. He has value. And he is more valuable to them if he's going to only take $6.5 million, because they can keep him or move him and still have him on the roster today. And what if Garoppolo took it because that's the best deal he can get? And oh yeah, by the way, if Trey Lance stinks, or if or if Trey Lance gets hurt, he's right there. He reassumes the quarterback position. I mean, like, look, this did in fact happen to Kurt Warner in Arizona. Okay? Just remember, Kurt Warner was in Arizona as a backup, and then Leinart got hurt, and he came in, and Kurt Warner was better than Leinart. And then the next year, it was the same dance. And Kurt Warner waited, and when he got his opportunity, he led him to a Super Bowl. Now, I don't think that happens with Garoppolo. He's not the Hall of Famer of a Kurt Warner. But the idea is, hey, man, just stay in the game. It's a long life. It's a long life. Stay in the game. Don't say nothing to nobody, but just do your job. Show up at work every day. And if you're good enough and you're ready, you'll get an opportunity. We can make it about a lot of things. Well, the Niners don't trust Trey Lance. Garoppolo's making 6.5. He's making backup money. He doesn't even have a playbook. Right? They likely overpaid him to keep him away from Seattle, to keep him relatively happy, to keep that asset that they know they can move if somebody else's quarterback goes down. And meantime, they protect themselves against some sort of traumatic injury to Trey Lance, or, God forbid, Trey Lance just stinks. What if it is exactly what it is?